Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to Starcraft 2. This time there's going to be a Protoss v Protoss PvP, and it's going to have a bit of a theme this video on timing attacks, as I had a very helpful comment in my previous video where I was analysing a loss against a Zerg player, where essentially what it boiled down to was me not making any concerted attack at any one moment, allowing my Zerg kind of opponent to sort of do whatever the hell they wanted. And what they wanted to do that game was macro like crazy. He had two bases ahead of me, he was full on hive tech, he had Ultralisks, Vipers, Corruptors, he probably would have gone Broodlords of it eventually. And yeah, naturally I wasn't quite expecting that, although I probably should have, and so lost the game. So let's just quickly pull that thing up there. There we go, so I can control some things that are quite important. And let's speed this up. So yeah, this game, it's going to be sort of what I did better than that match in terms of making an actual push. So yeah, let's just start commentating, shall we? Here we go. There's a bit of a probe Benny Hill music playing at the moment. I was sort of worried that he would do some kind of cannon rush, some kind of pylon rush. I'm not sure which one he would have gone for, but eventually he kind of backed off. Based on how he was building back at home, quite clearly he wasn't intending to do that, but honestly, I've almost had enough of cannon rushes at this point. They are not fun to play against. And I randomly decided to make a pylon here because seeing how he was slightly overreacting against my own probe with, I think it was like 2 to 3 probes of his own, I figured, hey, if I can block some mining time, force him to multitask a bit, that's probably worth the mineral investment. Maybe I should have cancelled it, but still, that wasn't too bad a start. He gets a faster expansion than I do. As you can see, it's sort of 3/4 the way done, and this one's only just reaching around a quarter way done, so he gets a better timing on his expansion. In future, I am going to be aiming for the very staple sort of 19 supply expand into Nexus. That seems to be what most people do, so you know what, I'll adopt that, take it for my own. Meanwhile, nothing else really is happening. This probe chase is happening. This is just something else that happened apparently. It was a bit of a weird early game, but let's speed it up, shall we, a little bit. We both take our natural expansions, although to be fair, I actually took my second expansion. What if this was a normal game? I don't believe there was any reason beyond I just didn't realise that this was actually my location for a natural expansion. And here, what happened was he sent 2 zealots and his mothership core over here, but fortunately my mothership core was in a very nice position, sort of positioned around here in between my 2 bases, so I was very able to just kind of hop it over, activate the pylon overcharge, and get rid of both zealots and indeed the mothership core. So yeah, I successfully deflected that attack. A bit of a weird one because zealots against Protoss, because Protoss units are largely ranged, they're not as effective until they get charged. At least that is my understanding of it. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that kind of 2 zealot mothership core attack is very unstandard, but regardless, it doesn't work out for him, so I feel very safe in just making a bunch of stuff. So that's what I do. A couple of gateways. No tech other than kind of the Twilight Council that is currently under construction and the initial Robo Bay. And I do believe that I send over, if I check my vision, I do believe that I send over a observer at some point as well, just to do some later on scouting. So here we go, this is the, actually that's an immortal, not an observer. There's the observer. So this should get some decent information for me. And let's see if I actually react accordingly to that information. So, still sort of trying to saturate my 2 bases. Really, I'm kind of fine with my timing on these gases. As you can see, I've got like 250 gas at the moment, and I'm short on minerals really. I want sort of a bit of a surplus in minerals so I can go into like faster expansions and more gateways, all of that good stuff. But yeah, at the moment, I start to churn out some immortals. Eventually, I do take a second robo facility just about here. But on the other side of the map, my opponent does actually snipe my observer with his observer. His observer from this robo coming out slightly later than mine, so that definitely wasn't fantastic for me. Meanwhile, still making workers. I just now take my gas, which I think is fine. Not too worried about that. I'm getting ground weapons 1 as well. And one thing that was slightly odd for my opponent was that I do believe he went for ground weapons, no, not ground weapons, ground shields before anything else, which was honestly a little bit bizarre. But there we go. From my understanding of it, ground weapons is generally the thing you want to go for with Protoss, because a lot of their units have either splash damage or just kind of benefit from increased damage in general. And of course the shield mechanic that allows them to regenerate health and kind of dart in, do damage, dart out, recover shields, do the whole thing, rinse, repeat. They want to have the most damage as possible so that those kind of hit and run tactics are as effective as possible. But if you've been looking at the minimap, you might have noticed the Stalker run by. It begins. So whilst this happens, I have not been able to scout it, but I've got 2 Immortals and I'm making more. This is the second Robo facility and I'm getting more upgrades. Eventually I do go for ground weapons too. But the Stalkers arrive, they start targeting a pylon, and those were definitely not the right targets, as the rest of my army has the time, therefore, to sort of demolish a good few Stalkers, just as a bit of tat-a-tat. Now, if I'd had, say, instead of these Adepts, sort of 4 more Stalkers, and Blink as well, instead of the Adept Glaives, I might have been able to chase those Stalkers down, and sort of just punish him a little bit extra hard, compared to what I did, which was, you know, take out 4 Stalkers, 3-4 Stalkers, and then back off. That would have been better, but regardless, eventually I do end up going into Blink. I've got it queued up in the Twilight Council, so that's perfectly fine. I'm getting Zealot legs as well, purely because I feel that Zealots are quite powerful to have in like a mixed Gateway Robo army at this point in the game. So meanwhile, this base is, quite frankly, it needs another couple of workers. As you can see, 14 out of 16, that's not fantastic. But even so, it's more or less sort of saturated, so I'm kind of happy with that. 2 bases, I'm sort of focusing more on the army production than the economy game. So with this kind of a build, honestly I should be planning to move out at around 10 minutes to go back onto the theme of making a strong timing attack, having a plan in your game and then executing it as best as you can. And if we take a look at the other side of the map, we will see why such a timing attack at 10 minutes would have been so powerful. And these Immortals need to get their move on. There they are. My opponent is going for a super greedy move with a expansion all the way over here that is really hard to defend, to be honest. If we take a look at my attack paths, there is one path sort of here, at this side of the map. There's another attack path here, once I've destroyed these rocks. And there's another one sort of over on this south side. Now the south side doesn't really impact anything, but the northern 2 attack paths, this one and this one, those both more or less lead straight to this base. So it's super greedy of him. And then he goes for this base here as well. So this is sort of 800, sort of going up to 1,000 minerals invested into expansions. At a point in the game where maybe he would actually have expected some kind of aggressive push. I mean, maybe he was playing a bunch of really slow matches recently, and therefore he was sort of feeling really greedy, he was going to take the initiative that way. But even so, 10 minutes passes, and this is where I really should have moved out. If we take a look at the army supply difference, I've got, you know, quite clearly quite a severe lead. I'm edging near to 40 supply lead in terms of my army. I've got the better upgrades, I've got both Blink, Charge, and Glaive Adepts, as well as nearly ground attack weapons 2, which, coupled with this really high Immortal Stalker kind of count, mixed in with a few Adepts and a couple of Sentries, this is a really solid army. And I sort of poke ahead a little bit here, but this is more or less just me kind of getting my army in a better position in case he attacks. And only now do I take my 3rd base, so given that I've been on 2 bases for so long, I probably should have thought about it and sort of realized that if my opponent was going for a 3rd base, then really I would be quite far economically behind at this point. Therefore, I should commit to an attack. And eventually, at 11 minutes 20 seconds, that is in fact what I do. But really, this could have been a whole minute 20 seconds earlier than what it ended up being. At 10 minutes, I had sort of the same army difference compared to my opponent, so this fight that is about to happen would have sort of happened in the same way, more or less. So we're doing a bit of a jig here whilst we warp in some more Stalkers, but quite frankly, the time wasted to warp in those extra Stalkers didn't really result in anything, as my opponent was also making units, so whatever. But here we go, the fight happens, and we can see that with all of my Sentry, Guardian Shields, and my very high Immortal count, coupled with the Stalkers, I just have the superior army. He has less Immortals, less Stalkers, and a few Phoenix, a couple of Void Rays, but the advantage that my army has is that my Immortals can destroy his ground army, and that leaves my Stalker count completely free to take on his Void Rays and other Stargate units. To be fair, he does have a couple of Disruptors, so he's going a little high-tech here, but really, at the end of the day, I just am left with a much larger force. I've got 85 army supply, if you look at the bottom, compared to his 3, and with that, we take the game. So, yeah, this match was sort of highlighting the importance of making a strong timing attack and realizing your relative sort of army strength at any one point in the game. So what I should have realized sort of a whole minute 20 seconds earlier than the time that I did eventually move out at, I should have realized at that 10-minute mark that I've been on 2 bases for the longest time, and I've been focusing on building my army for the longest time. What is the likelihood that my opponent has been doing the same? Especially at Gold League, I have been finding that a lot of people tend to be quite macro-focused. They're focused on expanding, as you can see here. I did not actually, funnily enough, I didn't have vision of this base here, but I possibly could have suspected that he was going to go for a 3rd base much faster than I ever did. I did eventually get one down, but it was probably quite slow, and if I'd realized this, I would have realized that my army count was probably better than his, and you know, etc, etc, I should have moved in much sooner than I ever did. And of course my upgrades were pretty baller. I had all the Twilight Council upgrades, slightly overkill one might say, but coupled with nearly ground weapons level 3, so I was in a really strong spot for this state of the game. You know, 12 minutes, this is not a bad army to have, in my eyes. At higher leagues and higher ranks, you can probably do a lot better, but regardless, considering I'm gold and fairly new, I'm fairly happy with how this game went. So yeah, thank you for watching guys, and thank you to everyone who comments on these videos in Starcraft 2. Definitely I will be doing more of them, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next ones. Ta-ta!